Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss how the case has been made for increasing taxes on the wealthy from what have seemed some unlikely sources, Blairites and the Financial Times. But it's a sign of just how far out of whack the Tories sent wealth inequality over the past 14 years that everyone who understands the situation and has genuine regard for the country and its economy knows that there has to be a rebalancing. And despite the fact that people who only get their news about Labour's policies from the media, understandably thinking, well, Labour's ruling all of this out. What are the chances of this being a misunderstanding? After all, Labour have made no secret of their intention to invest heavily. And although they've toned down some of their investment promises, they haven't toned down their investment ambitions. Are they leaving room between the lines of what they say they're going to deliver to what people are calling for? Because first of all, what is being called for and from whom? So first of all, the Financial Times. Now, I like the FT because it's one of the few national media outlets in this country which tells the truth as it sees it. It's written for investors, so it's ultimately right on the side of capitalists, but their entire business model works on the basis of giving their readers the truth, unlike basically every other magazine and newspaper in the country. They're not trying to hoodwink them into voting against their own interests. For example, it's been remarkably frank about Brexit. I would say it's been the best media outlet for Brexit news, in fact, but purely from the economic side of things. Now, there's an argument, an article in the Financial Times arguing that Labour need to be bold on the economy. Now, you may think, hang on a minute, hold on. You look at this with trepidation. Financial Times, written for investors, capitalist. We know what bold means, don't we? It means savage tax cuts and parading around with a big banner that says trickle down, make Liz trust the Chancellor. No. The author is arguing for something very different. They're arguing that the fiscal rules that Labour are lashing themselves to are unhelpful. Now, they are politically unnecessary, so I'm not going to really argue against this. But numerous economists have pointed out that the fiscal rules the government of all stripes adopt are pointless, unnecessarily shackling them. Not that fiscal rules are. They're not saying we shouldn't have fiscal rules. We don't want to end up like Greece. Just the nature of the fiscal rules we adopt are a sort of nonsense. It's arguing for borrowing being good for investment. So why have this thing about borrowing having to come down as a share of GDP? You know, Labour have also said that they want to borrow for investment, but economists, including this one of the FT, are going, yeah, but we want loads more of it, right? And what soured the deal? They all understand what soured the deal. The fact that interest rates have gone up quite a lot now and are going to stay high-ish means that the cost of that borrowing has gone up. But the arguments always are, but you make more, as long as you invest it properly. I mean, we don't mean give it to your mates in the Cayman Islands. As long as you invest it properly, you've got to make more back. The article also argues that although there are a lot of lazy arguments both in favour and against higher taxation, it is nonetheless the case that this notion that higher taxes is bad for growth is completely unfounded. And I've been pushing this for a while. Whenever I see a right-wing muppet on social media trying to make this claim, I invite them to study a graph. There's a graph of tax rate against GDP per capita, and it shows a very clear positive correlation. It's not a very tight one. There are exceptions, of course, but mostly you see those exceptions are small countries with unique features. But the major economies are all on that line. It shows you cannot have high growth without high taxes. Investment costs money, and the most efficient way to organise that investment in the national interest is get the government to do it. The problem with leaving it to the private sector is a private company only invests in its own interests. Then there's an article in The Guardian. Blairites arguing for a wealth tax. Oh dear. We might be used to these arguments coming from people who explicitly want the fall of the world order and who may not be, as a result, thinking everything through. But we're talking here about the sort of people you'd imagine would be arguing against tax and spend. And yet, and I emphasise again, it's because of the extreme position the Tories have left us in, where we literally have no major infrastructure going on in the UK at all now. The need is obvious to everyone. However, Labour are ruling all of this out. Or are they? In a sense, I can't know for sure until the manifesto is launched. I want to read the precise wording, so I'm getting increasingly irritable that the manifesto has not been launched. When a competent politician makes a statement, they are relying on the fact that you will ignore what appear to be superfluous words. You listen to what they say, oh, it means this. And I'm doing it all the time. I'm constantly saying, no, it doesn't. You need to pay attention to this. Because people do it all the time. You can shut a statement, and if there appears to be a word in there that isn't needed, you ignore it. You just naturally ignore it. But once you realise that every single word a politician says is carefully chosen, there are no superfluous words, all of a sudden, when you start putting emphasis on words that you've been otherwise ignoring, it changes the meaning dramatically. Without the benefit of the manifesto, what have Labour suggested so far? Well, they've said that the rate of income tax, national insurance and now VAT won't go up. In terms of the income tax, national insurance, unfortunate, but probably necessary politically. The FT article argues that we should reform our tax system. As a result of those reforms, we could actually make VAT go down, which would help people on lower incomes, as well as stimulate the economy. And Labour, of course, would not be breaking promises in doing so. But the other side of it is income tax and national insurance should be combined as well. And there's a few people arguing for this. However, that would involve breaking this promise, because it would involve making, first of all, it would involve making pensioners pay more tax. So unless and until the balance of voting power shifts away from the older age group, the idea would be political suicide. One thing that a lot of Tories complain about is that, you can get to a certain level of earning and then you have to halt your productivity, because if you earn much more, you actually lose more money. And that is because our tax system is really complex. For most of us on like ordinary incomes, it's not that complex. But for a lot of people earning a lot, it is. And the reason it's so complex, this is what does my head in when you see these Tories like John Redwood, our tax system is so complicated. It's people like that make it complex. The reason it's so complex is so that the Tories can keep introducing lots of loopholes for the rich to climb through. Simplifying the tax system would remove these self-imposed barriers to productivity. Economists on the left and right agree with that. However, if you change the tax system, you create winners and losers. And so Labour, unless they are very cute with their language, won't be able to change the income tax or national insurance system, because then they'll have broken their promise to some people at least. Unless, of course, they can guarantee that the only people they're breaking their promise to are those who don't vote for them anyway, in which case, whatever. But Labour have also said they won't impose a wealth tax. Now, this is the one that is the least clear of all. It's unclear just how politically necessary this was to say it as well. But it's where even pro-capitalist commentators have a problem. Wealth inequality is so huge, so obvious, there is no longer a rational argument against wealth taxes. However, are Labour really ruling out wealth taxes? Well, yes, they said so. But a wealth tax is just literally a levy on someone. It's like, you've got this much wealth, you're going to have to pay this much tax. It doesn't stop them levying lots of taxes on the wealthy. And we know that Labour are going to increase taxes on the wealthy, not by applying higher rates of tax or creating new taxes, although they don't rule that out, but by simply taking away tax breaks, which only benefit those who are well off. Now, removing tax breaks isn't a wealth tax, because we're not taxing people based on how much wealth they have. We're just taking away the tax exemptions for certain spending. But it is a tax which nonetheless raises the level of tax paid by the wealthy. So are there more things that Labour can do? Well, one suggestion in the Guardian article is to set capital gains tax at the same level as income tax. Now, that would not only prevent one obvious form of tax avoidance, but it would also be something that would mean the wealthy paying a fairer share of tax. There are some times when in your accounts you've sort of got a choice, and you can put something down as capital gains rather than income and therefore pay a lower rate. And there's sometimes when you would just naturally put capital gains even if the rates were the same. Either way, it means we'd raise more tax revenues, and it's something that Labour have not ruled out. They haven't said they're going to do it, but they haven't ruled it out. Now, I don't know whether Reeves is even thinking in these terms, but I really cannot think of anything she's said that rules it out. The authors of the article also suggest a major tax review. Now, would be a stunningly good idea, and they should definitely do this, because reviews are brilliant ways of introducing measures in a way that can't draw accusations of hiding intentions during an election campaign. In fact, commissions are brilliant for things like this. Sunak, for example, you know, his national service proposal. We know some of the details of what he's saying it will do, but what is he actually promising? All he's actually promising is a royal commission on the concept. That's it. That's the promise. That way, although he can say, oh, it would do this and it would do this and it would do this, he's not committing to any of it. Because after all, the commission may say, no, this is a stupid idea. You should do it like this instead, this completely different way. And he could go, oh, because all he actually promised was the Royal Commission. They also argue that you could reform council tax via a revaluation of tax bands as part of Labour's devolution plans. So it wouldn't be Labour doing it as such. It would be because Labour are devolving power anyway. So it'd be like saying, well, we're going to give you the power to do this. And if you decide to revalue your tax bands so you can raise more money for local services, that's up to you. That gives local authorities the power to modernise council tax. Labour haven't promised not to muck about with that. And one of their main platforms is giving more financial independence to local areas. What I'm saying is, although Labour appear to be closing off some useful avenues for reforming our tax system, some of them are just that. It's appearances. Some of them are more explicit, but there are also plenty of others as well. People often think very simplistically about tax and spend because most people who think about tax think about income tax. They may think about national insurance as well, and to a lesser degree VAT. But that's it. You don't really think about other taxes. But there's a whole level of crazy in the tax system for particularly people earning way more than ordinary folk. Remember, most people in this country don't really think about their taxes because they don't do a tax return form. In some countries, everyone does a tax return. You don't in this country, your employer does it for you. So it's only people like me who derive my own income who do tax returns, at which point you see just how crazy the tax system is. And all Labour have really ruled out, as far as I can tell without the specific manifesto wording, which I'll be very interested in, is that they won't levy a tax on the wealth someone has. But there are loads of ways to levy more taxes on those who hold that wealth. And finally, two encouraging arguments that we may be pleasantly surprised at what comes as this Parliament unfolds. Unfortunately, we would have to wait a few years to see it. The first is that Labour cannot make excuses for poor economic growth in the way the Tories do, and they know it, even if the excuses are good ones. They know they will have to have significantly boosted the economy come the following election. They cannot leave it to chance. So if you've got a load of economists saying, well, the only way to guarantee it is with massive levels of investment, there's going to be massive levels of investment. The second is that expert economists are coming out of the woodwork from all over the place. And they're all saying you cannot tinker your way to growth. They've all got different ideas about what Labour could do. But every single one of them is saying we need to massively increase investment. And part of the way to do that has got to mean much higher levels of taxation. None of them are arguing for the poor to be taxed more either. In fact, in some cases, they're arguing for rebalancing of it to shift the tax burden to the wealthy end. They're all doing that on the left and the right. Well, Reeves is also an expert economist in terms of her background. So she will understand what the rest of her profession is much freer to write about in the national media, which is encouraging, even if it does mean we do have to wait and see. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.